This is not the most difficult law school admissions cycle ever, not historically, not numerically, but there is one crucial distinction. This is one of the most psychologically destabilizing cycles applicants have faced in a long time. And those two facts can be true at the same time. Difficulty is about the competition that you face, and stress is about uncertainty. And there is tons of uncertainty this cycle. Now, when applicants talk about competitiveness, they usually mean how it feels, how anxious they are, how long decisions take, and how many people online say they've been waitlisted. And that's normal, it's human, but it's not the definition. In admissions, competitive has a brutally and literally simple meaning. It's the number of law school applicants relative to the number of available 1L seats. That ratio determines how hard it is to get in. Everything else, waitlists, silence, delays, that's all a consequence of how schools manage risk. And here is the simple grounding fact. That ratio is not historically or uniquely extreme right now. The largest law school applicant pool ever was about 104,000 applicants nationwide, and that was decades ago. We are nowhere near that number today. On the enrollment side, the highest number of first-year law school seats ever filled was roughly 51,000. Again, not close to where we are right now. And we've also seen cycles where enrollment dropped to the mid-30,000s. And so if we're asking, have there been cycles with more pressure than this? The answer, of course, is yes. So the question really is, why does this one feel so bad? Now, there are several forces operating simultaneously, and they compound each other. And none of them show up cleanly in acceptance rate statistics. First thing to consider is that this is one of the slowest admissions cycles in decades. Schools are taking longer to review files, they're delaying committee meetings, and they're releasing batches of smaller decision batches. And so what that does is it compresses decision-making later into the cycle. Instead of earlier decisions, we're seeing earlier ambiguity, and we're seeing later movement. And this cycle, silence from law schools mostly means that they just don't know what they're doing yet. And waitlists are being used by law schools as a financial instrument. They're a budget hedge because the federal loan cap changes, the ending of the Grad Plus loans, that has altered applicant behavior in ways that schools did not fully anticipate. Applicants are now rejecting higher ranked schools over cost in favor of lower ranked schools where they can get more scholarship money. And they're negotiating harder for those scholarships. They're not just taking and accepting what law schools give them. And so law schools, in turn, respond defensively by waitlisting more applicants and outright admitting fewer students. So there's not so much clarity. There's just more institutional uncertainty overall. And then law schools, of course, are concerned about yield. How many students who are accepted to a school will ultimately choose to attend that school? And yield affects the rankings, it affects tuition revenue, and it affects class size targets. So admissions officers, because of all the financial uncertainty, they don't know who's going to walk away from them and reject the offer of admission over the debt they might take on, who's going to wait for better scholarship offers, and who's going to delay law school by a year. And so they slow down. Now, applicants will assume that if they haven't heard back, something must be wrong with the file. Am I definitely going to get rejected? And that assumption leads to mistakes. It's wrong to treat being waitlisted as an outright rejection. It's wrong to withdraw your application too early. And it's definitely wrong to accept an offer of admission without negotiating scholarships. Now, if the cycle were faster, if it were a normal cycle, then acting earlier would matter most. But in this cycle, you're actually rewarded over different traits and characteristics and behaviors. If you hold on to your leverage longer, if you negotiate scholarships harder, if you analyze the financial data better, you're going to have better outcomes. And if you can negotiate harder for the scholarships, if you can potentially benefit from later waitlist movement, you're also going to win. Now, this doesn't mean doing nothing, of course. It means you've got to stay responsive to law school communications. You've got to monitor their communication and be ready to act when there's an opportunity to act. And so this cycle is quietly favoring applicants who have strong numbers but modest school lists, applicants who are comfortable waiting into late spring and early summer, and applicants who prioritize financial value, not the prestige or the ranking of the school alone. But the cycle is going to hurt those who need answers fast and early. It's going to hurt you if you anchor your identity to a single outcome. In other words, if you get one-itis over a particular school. And if this were truly the hardest cycle ever, we would see an explosion in the number of applicants. We would see precipitous drops in acceptance rates, and we would see schools over-enrolling, in other words, accepting too many students out of fear. But we're not seeing any of that. We're just seeing a shift in the timing of when application decisions get rendered. And so the most competitive admission cycle ever likely happened decades ago, not in 2026. So this is not the hardest cycle ever. It is slower, of course. It's more waitlist heavy. It's more financially constrained. And all of that makes it more psychologically demanding. But chaos is not the same thing as difficulty. This is just a cycle where things are dragging on. It's resolving later than normal. And so you've got to keep that in mind as you're getting waitlisted, as you're not hearing back from schools for months and months. Of course, you can send letters of continued interest to express your interest in a given school. You can play hardball when it comes to negotiation. Do so politely, of course, but don't be afraid to go back and forth a couple of times. And know your value. If you have a stronger LSAT score, if you have a stronger GPA, if your numbers are above the medians of the schools to which you're applying, you're in a better position of leverage from which to negotiate scholarships, get better outcomes. And of course, your GPA is likely fixed at this point if you're a senior in college or a recent grad or an older grad, a non-traditional student, but your LSAT score is still the biggest number you can improve to have better leverage, whether you're still applying this cycle, or whether you're retaking it for more scholarship reconsideration, or you're applying maybe next cycle in the fall.